Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Boss Economics World, where we slice through the economic baloney, expose government blunders, and call out the policy clowns who've turned your wallet into a sad, deflated balloon. I'm your host, the no-nonsense, chart-wielding, coffee-fueled econ warrior, here to break down the latest economic dumpster fire. Buckle up, folks, because today, we're diving headfirst into President Trump's 50% steel and aluminum tariff hike, a move so bold, so reckless, it's like throwing a Molotov cocktail into an already blazing trade war. And guess what? You, the taxpayer, are the one getting burned. Let's roll. So, here's the deal, folks. On June 4, 2025, at the stroke of midnight, because apparently, economic chaos is best served fresh, President Donald Trump cranked up steel and aluminum tariffs from 25% to a whopping 50%. Why? According to the man himself, it's all about national security. Yes, you heard that right. Apparently, the fate of the free world hinges on whether Uncle Sam can churn out enough steel beams to fend off, what, exactly? An alien invasion? A sudden shortage of soup cans? The White House claims this tariff hike is necessary because the previous 25% rate didn't enable domestic industries to develop and maintain the rates of capacity production utilization needed for sustained health and national defense needs. Translation: we tried a dumb idea, it didn't work, so let's double down and make it dumber. Oh, and they posted this gem on X, because nothing screams serious economic policy like a late-night social media rant. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Tariffs, at their core, are taxes on imports. They're supposed to protect domestic industries by making foreign goods more expensive, right? Sounds great on paper, until you realize that the US economy isn't a 1950s steel mill anymore. We're a globalized, interconnected beast, and moves like this don't just protect American jobs, they set off a chain reaction of economic pain that hits everyone, from factory workers to your local coffee shop owner. And guess who's footing the bill? You are. Let's start with the obvious. This tariff hike isn't happening in a vacuum. The US is already knee-deep in trade negotiations with half the planet, thanks to Trump's obsession with reciprocal duties. And let me tell you, folks, things are getting spicy. Just last week, a federal court slapped down a bunch of Trump's other tariffs, calling them legally shaky. But does that stop our tariff-happy president? Nope. He's out here, swinging 50% steel tariffs like a kid with a piñata stick, oblivious to the fact that the piñata is stuffed with dynamite. And who's getting hit hardest? Our trading partners, of course. Mexico's economy minister, Marcelo Ebrard, is already crying foul, calling the tariff hike unsustainable and begging for an exemption. The UK, meanwhile, gets to keep its 25% rate, for now, while both sides scramble to hash out a deal by July 9, 2025. But let's not kid ourselves, these negotiations aren't about fair trade. They're about strong-arming other countries into submission, and the result is a global trade war that's heating up faster than a microwave burrito. Here's the kicker, folks, trade wars don't just hurt foreigners, they boomerang right back to the US economy. According to a 2024 study by the National Bureau of Economic Research, NBR, Trump's earlier tariffs, back in 2018, cost US consumers and businesses over $40 billion annually in higher prices. And that was with tariffs at 25%. Now, with steel and aluminum tariffs at 50%, the Tax Foundation estimates that the average American household could see an additional $1,200 in annual costs by 2026, thanks to higher prices on everything from cars to canned goods. But hey, at least we'll have national security, right? Now, let's talk about the supposed winners of this tariff hike, the US steel and aluminum industries. Trump loves to parade around factory floors, like his little pep rally at the United States Steel Corporation plant in Pennsylvania on May 30, 2025. Promising workers that these tariffs will save their jobs. Nobody's going to be able to steal your industry, he told them. At 50%, they can no longer get over the fence. Inspiring stuff, huh? Too bad it's a load of economic hogwash. Here's the reality, folks, the US steel industry employs about 140,000 workers, according to the American Iron and Steel Institute. Sounds like a lot, right? Wrong. Compare that to the 6.5 million workers in industries that use steel, like construction, automotive, and manufacturing, and you start to see the problem. For every steel job protected by these tariffs, you're putting dozens of other jobs at risk by jacking up the cost of raw materials. A 2023 report from the Peterson Institute for International Economics found that Trump's original steel tariffs actually cost the US economy 75,000 jobs in downstream industries. And now, with tariffs doubled, the damage could be even worse. Oh, and let's not forget the irony here. During that same Pennsylvania speech, Trump endorsed the sale of U.S. steel to Japan's Nippon Steel Corporation, while promising it would remain under some form of American control. Wait, what? So, we're slapping 50% tariffs on foreign steel to protect American industry, but it's totally cool to sell one of our biggest steelmakers to a foreign company. Folks, this isn't economic policy, it's performance art. Now, let's zoom out to the big, ugly economic monster lurking in the shadows, inflation. If you've been to a grocery store, bought a car, or paid your rent lately, you know that prices are already out of control. The Consumer Price Index, CPI, in May 2025 showed annual inflation at 5.2%, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, well above the Federal Reserve's 2% target. And what does the government do? It pours gasoline on the fire with a 50% tariff hike that's guaranteed to drive up the cost of goods across the board. Here's how it works, folks. Steel and aluminum aren't just used to make tanks for national security. They're in everything: your car, your appliances, your kid's school lunch tray. When you jack up the cost of those raw materials, businesses have no choice but to pass those costs on to you, the consumer. A 2025 analysis by Oxford Economics predicts that these new tariffs could add 0.7 percentage points to U.S. inflation by the end of 2026. That might not sound like much, but when you're already shelling out an extra $500 a year just to fill your gas tank, every penny counts. And who's to blame for this mess? You guessed it, the government. Instead of letting markets work, they're meddling, tinkering, and slapping on tariffs like they're playing a game of economic whack-a-mole. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve is stuck between a rock and a hard place, trying to fight inflation with interest rate hikes that are already choking small businesses and homebuyers. The average 30-year mortgage rate hit 7.1% in May 2025, according to Freddie Mac, making homeownership a distant dream for millions of Americans. But hey, at least we've got national security, right? Let's not forget the global fallout, folks. The US isn't an island, well, except for Hawaii, but you get the point. When we sneeze, the world catches a cold, and this tariff hike is a full-blown flu pandemic. China, the European Union, and Canada have already promised retaliatory tariffs on US exports, from soybeans to whiskey. Remember 2018, when Trump's first round of tariffs triggered a trade war with China? US farmers lost $27 billion in exports, according to the US Department of Agriculture, and taxpayers had to cough up $28 billion in bailouts to keep them afloat. Deja vu, anyone? And here's the kicker: these tariffs don't even achieve their stated goal of reducing imports. A 2024 study by the International Monetary Fund, IMF, found that Trump's earlier tariffs reduced U.S. steel imports by just 10%, while driving up domestic steel prices by 25%. Why? Because foreign producers find workarounds, like rerouting shipments through third countries, or simply eat the cost and keep selling. Meanwhile, American businesses and consumers get stuck with the tab. So, let's recap, folks. We've got a president who's using national security as a flimsy excuse to wage economic war on his own people. We've got a government that's propping up a dying industry while screwing over millions of workers in other sectors. We've got inflation running wild, trade wars erupting, and a global economy teetering on the edge of chaos. And who's to blame? You guessed it, the clowns in Washington, D.C., who think they can micromanage a $27 trillion economy with a sledgehammer. Here's my advice, folks: don't fall for the America First propaganda. These tariffs aren't about protecting jobs, they're about protecting votes in swing states like Pennsylvania. They're not about national security, they're about political theater. And they're definitely not about making your life better, unless you think paying $1,200 more a year for the same stuff is a great deal. As for you finance pros out there, keep an eye on the bond market. The Treasury yield curve is already flashing warning signs, with the 10-year yield spiking to 4.8% in June 2025, according to Bloomberg. If inflation keeps roaring, the Fed might have to slam on the brakes even harder, risking a full-blown recession by 2027. And for the rest of you, my fellow economic warriors, stay sharp, stay skeptical, and don't let these government goons fool you with their tariff tantrums. That's all for today, folks. If you liked this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more no-nonsense economic takedowns. And remember, in a world of economic chaos, Boss Economics World is your beacon of truth. See you next time.